On Fridays, we visit with Michael Snyder. He is the Culture Blaster on YouTube, on Twitter. He follows movies. He follows streaming television shows. He follows the world of music. Such great takes on things. Michael Snyder, welcome to KGO.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Brad. Yeah, how many fools who thoughtlessly leap back into the dating pool are going to mistake COVID-19 fever for love? I mean, that's a problem. You get a little flushed. You get a little excited. You don't have your mask on. Ooh. No. Full-on craziness, guys. I don't get it. How's everybody doing?
I was up late last night. I was telling everyone in the first hour, watching the Laurel Canyon. It's a docuseries. I think it's just 2 episodes. And it's on Epix. Now, I'd seen the Laurel Canyon thing done by Jacob Dylan. And I really like that. But this new one, yeah, go ahead.
That's a vanity project for Jacob Dylan, where he pulls together some admittedly interesting interviews and a little archival footage in the service of him doing covers at a live show of all these songs of his youth. It's very much self-indulgent.
I love that you say that. I love that you mentioned that. Go ahead.
Laurel Canyon on Epix is the real deal, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to address it at some point this morning, because it is a 2-parter, and it traces the most flourishing music scene in probably rock and roll history that had a time and a place. I mean, they've likened it to Paris in the 20s, this creative flowering in Los Angeles that was centered around the hills and valleys of the Laurel Canyon area, which is literally 5 minutes from downtown Hollywood in the Sunset Strip. And everybody basically migrated there in the 60s of note. Love, The Doors, The Monkees, Frank Zappa. We could go on. The Beach Boys, 1 or 2 of them had a place up there. The Mamas and Papas were kind of a nexus in some ways. And what you get with this Laurel Canyon documentary on Epix is the music. You get interviews that are basically archival. You get a few modern-day takes by Henry Diltz and a couple other people. He was a photographer who basically started out as a musician in the scene. And it's a You Are There situation. And the second half of it, not as interesting to me. It's the rise of country rock, the Electro Asylum bands, and beyond the Flying Burrito Brothers and the Byrds and their original country rock excursions. I'm not that wedded to it, but the first part of the 2-parter is just,
Yeah, it's called Laurel Canyon. It's on Epix, and I was telling everybody you can, get it on Amazon. They'll give you a week free trial if you don't get Epix. All right, on to some of your other stuff. I also saw this King of Staten Island advertised on Netflix. It's the profile of Pete Davidson. Is that what it is?
Well, essentially, anyone who knows a little bit about Pete Davidson's backstory, this bad boy, this troublemaker, this self-destructive but lovable Saturday Night Live character, his dad was a fireman who died on 9/11 on a rescue mission in the World Trade Center. And I say this because the King of Staten Island must be rife with autobiography. It's the kind of serio-comic story of a very pivotal time in the life of this guy, Scott, an indolent 24-year-old who's living with his widowed mother on Staten Island. And it's the latest movie from director-screenwriter Judd Apatow. But it's more a showcase for the star, Pete Davidson, who also co-wrote the script. And it's worth watching with caveats. It's 136 minutes long, so it's a little bit lengthy, but it's generally appealing, and Davidson's shambling comedic and acting skills are on full display here. The Scott character is just a kid when his fireman father dies a hero's death, and his little sister's kind of smart and cute and ambitious is off to college, leaving Scott at home with his mother, very, very patient, a nurse played in the latest of her string of attractive working-class mom roles by Marissa Tomei. And she wants to date after all these years of devoting herself to motherhood and her career. And Scott, a layabout, loves his comfy life at home, does not hit it off with mom's suitor, who is well played, by the way, by actor-comedian Bill Burr. Very impressive work by him. And, obviously trouble ensues. And Davidson's, stunted man-child seems so fully realized. It's got to be a consequence of what I presume to be all the autobiographical elements here. It's the second recent impressive screen outing by Davidson, playing kind of a likable, immature, and self-destructive character after last year's big-time Adolescence, which I also liked. I guess he's really good at playing variations of himself, I suppose. It ambles, but I found it amusing and affecting. And the supporting cast, in addition to Bill Burr and Marissa Tomei, includes Belle Powley, who plays Scott's kind of earthy, sweet-natured sex buddy, and Steve Buscemi as a fireman who knew Scott's dad, and even Judd Apatow's kid Maud plays Scott's little sister.
Judd Apatow's kids make every one of Judd Apatow's offerings. I got to move you along, Michael, because we're kind of out of time. So somebody asked about Artemis Fowl. Will you update us? Yeah.
It's on Disney Plus, and it's kind of a disappointment, to be honest with you. It's a questionable exercise in franchise building. It's based on the first couple of books in a kid's fantasy series about this obnoxious, supposedly brilliant adolescent named Artemis Fowl Jr. and his fight to find and save his missing father, and kind of as a side effect, save the world. It turns out that Dad's been kidnapped by a mysterious villain who's threatening humanity and is an equal menace to the fairies, trolls, gnomes, and such who live in a kind of a high-tech kingdom many miles below the surface of the earth. This movie it seems to be missing elements. It's an hour and a half long, and it feels jumbled and pointless. One character who's introduced kind of disappears two-thirds of the way through. The weird thing is it's got Colin Farrell as the father. Judi Dench plays kind of a tough-minded leader of the fairy army. Josh Gad is basically an info dump, but he's a narrator in the form of a giant dwarf. It disappointed me. It hits its conclusion, and so many things are not resolved. They clearly wanted a sequel. Maybe it should have been the first 3 episodes of the 10-episode miniseries, but unfortunately, that's not what it is.
The High Note.
The High Note. I'll tell you quickly, I love an aspirational show business tale, and this is one of a young woman trying to break into music production, as well as the struggle of an aging superstar diva to remain relevant, and then there's some romantic comedy. It's supposed to go behind the scenes of the music business as Maggie, who's the personal assistant to Grace Davis, a Diana Ross-style queen of soul pop. Maggie wants to produce records, and she meets a handsome young man who's become a star with her input. And this is kind of perfunctory and predictable. It benefits because you have some Hollywood legacy kids here. Dakota Johnson, daughter of Melanie Griffith and Don Johnson, plays would-be producer Maggie, and actress-singer Tracy Ellis Ross, daughter of no less than Diana Ross, plays Grace the superstar, and Ice Cube, tough glib rapper, plays Grace's bottom-line obsessed manager, and Kelvin Harrison Jr., so good in some recent films, Loose, Waves, The Photograph, is a talented young singer on the way up. You get Eddie Izzard and Bill Pullman. I wanted more out of this, but I think it's kind of diverting stuff. With a better script that dug deeper into the relationships, it would have been great. But the music is fun, not hard to enjoy it for what it is, good-natured, kind of disposable fluff tied up with a big O.
We're right up against it, Michael. But just to review, King of Staten Island, long, but you generally liked it. You felt it was generally good, and Artemis Fowl, great components and stuff that goes into it, but it misses for you. The High Note
doesn't work.
Yeah, The High Note, again, with some great pedigree there involved, it generally works for you. It's okay, you would say, yes?
Yeah. This is not a red letter day when it comes to film reviews, but I did think The King of Staten Island has, some worth to it, and so does The High Note. I'm sorry about Artemis Fowl. The kids might be diverted by it, but it's just all over the place.
Michael Snyder can be read in the Marina Times. You can read his Coastal Commuter piece. He's got a good piece on sort of being shut in, as we have all been for months now. And you can also catch his reviews on Twitter. He's Culture Blaster, isn't it? That's just Culture Blaster, right? And then
at Culture Blaster, you bet.
At Culture Blaster, and on YouTube also Culture Blaster. He's Michael Snyder. Thanks, Michael.
You bet.
All right. Good times. We'll check in with Pat Thurston next as we continue. KGO 810.